They gave us timeless soul and unforgettable love songs, but behind the smooth harmonies, the Delfonics were quietly falling apart from within. In this video, we're taking you deep into the tragic truth behind one of Philadelphia's most iconic soul groups. From internal conflicts and shocking lineup splits, to heartbreaking deaths and legal feuds over the group's very name. The story of the Delfonics is more complicated and more emotional than you've ever been told. Who's still alive in 2025? What really happened to the members you grew up listening to? And why did a group so full of talent fall apart just as the world was falling in love with their sound? Keep watching to find out. How the Delfonics got their start, the story of William Poogie Hart. It all began in Philadelphia, sometime around 1965 or 1966. Before the Delfonics became a household name, a young William Poogie Hart was already chasing his musical dreams. He started out singing in small local groups, acts like Little Heart and the Everglows, the Veltons, the Four Guys, and the Four Gents. These were corner doo-wop groups made up of friends from the neighborhood, the kind of street harmonies that defined Philly's sound. Many of his fellow singers were also schoolmates from Overbrook High School. William often performed alongside his brother Wilbert Hart, as well as Richie Daniels, Randy Kaine, Jimmy Rowan, Stan Lathan, and Donald Cannon. They weren't professionals yet, but they shared a deep love for music and spent countless hours rehearsing and harmonizing wherever they could, especially on Philadelphia's sidewalks and street corners. By 1964, William and Wilbert decided to start something more serious. They formed a group called the DELFONICS with their friends Randy Kaine and Richie Daniels. When Richie left to join the military, they brought in a new singer named Ricky Johnson. Eventually, Randy returned, and the group settled into a trio, William, Wilbert, and Randy. They kept the name the DELFONICS, which they borrowed from a stereo machine the Hart brothers had in their basement, a place where they had spent years practicing and bonding over music. At the time, William was working at a barbershop in Philadelphia. He cut hair during the day but never let go of his dream. In fact, he often brought his guitar to work and sang his original songs between customers. One day, his life changed. A man named Stan Watson walked into the barbershop and heard William singing. Impressed by his voice and songwriting, Stan mentioned that he knew a talented music producer named Tom Bell, who had already worked with major artists like Chubby Checker. Stan believed Tom could help take William's group to the next level. At the time, Tom Bell was working with the Cameo Parkway label. Known as a perfectionist, Bell was a gifted arranger and musician, someone who could truly elevate a song. Stan introduced William to him, and William played a track he had written called "He Don't Really Love You." Tom loved it. He quickly arranged the music and helped the group record the song, which was released on a small label called Moonshot Records. Initially, the group's name was mistakenly printed as the Delfonics on the record, and Tom Bell was credited as Tommy Bell. But not long after, they corrected the spelling, and the Delfonics were born. In 1967, they released their second song, "You've Been Untrue," again with Tom Bell's guidance. This time, it was put out through Cameo Records. That's how the Delfonics began: humble roots, raw talent, and the right people coming together at the right time. Once they found their sound, the group quickly rose to fame and became one of the defining voices of the Philadelphia soul movement. The rise of the Delfonics, soul icons of the 60s and 70s. Their breakthrough came with unforgettable hits like "Didn't I Blow Your Mind This Time," "La La Means I Love You," and "Ready or Not, Here I Come." These songs weren't just chart toppers, they became the soundtrack to a generation. Their music echoed across radios nationwide, with fans of all ages singing along to every note. What set the Delfonics apart was their ability to turn complicated emotions, love, heartbreak, longing, into beautifully simple melodies. Their harmonies were smooth, their lyrics poetic, and their delivery soulful. Whether it was a wedding, a high school dance, or a quiet night with the radio on, the Delfonics were there. Over the years, their songs found their way into movies, TV shows, and even video games, cementing their legacy as timeless soul icons. But even success couldn't save them from themselves. As their fame grew, cracks began to show beneath the surface. Despite their success, internal conflicts began pulling the group apart. At the center of the tension were the Hart brothers, William and Wilbert. They began to disagree about the future of the group. Who should lead? What direction should their music take? Creative clashes turned into personal arguments. Slowly but surely, the chemistry that had once held the group together started to fade. Members began leaving. Others joined. The lineup changed so frequently that fans struggled to keep track. And then, the unthinkable happened. The Delfonics split into two separate groups. One was led by William Hart, the other by Wilbert Hart. To fans, it became confusing. Two groups touring under the same name. Two versions of the Delfonics. Which one was the real one? William Hart's leadership and the growing divide. William Poogie Hart was many things: talented, driven, and deeply committed to the music. He believed in the vision of the Delfonics and worked hard to guide the group to success. In interviews, he often described himself as humble, saying, "You know, you want to be humble. I am humble. I'm very humble, and I know that through the grace of God, everything's happening." But leadership, especially in a group of strong voices, comes with complications. William's creativity and strong personality made him the face of the Delfonics in the eyes of many. He wasn't just singing the songs, he was writing them, shaping the group's identity, and making most of the decisions. Some of the members didn't take that well. Over time, his dominance began to cause tension. While his leadership had helped them rise, it also began to create distance. William controlled not just the music, but the group's image, business matters, and finances. Some felt their voices weren't being heard. What once felt like a team started to feel like a one-man show. As the group gained fame, internal frustrations began to bubble over. Bandmates quietly questioned how the money was being handled. Some believed Hart was taking a larger share of the earnings and not distributing income fairly. Others felt he was using his position to benefit himself at the group's expense. And in the world of music, where trust is everything, those kinds of suspicions can break the foundation of even the strongest groups. Legal battles and the beginning of the end. As the internal tensions grew, outside complications only made things worse. One of the biggest issues the group faced was over the legal rights to the name the Delfonics. As members came and went, some leaving the group, others returning, the question of who really owned the name became harder to answer. This disagreement led to legal battles that dragged on for years. Lawyers got involved. Courtrooms became battlegrounds. The legal fights weren't just costly, they were draining. The group had less time to focus on their music. Creativity took a back seat to paperwork, court dates, and confusion. Even fans were thrown off. At times, they'd attend a Delfonics show only to find unfamiliar faces on stage. With multiple groups touring under the same name, it became harder to tell which was the real deal. The name lost its magic. And then, in 1974, another blow hit the group. Major Harris, one of their standout vocalists, decided to leave. It happened shortly after they released their fifth album, Alive and Kicking. Harris had a powerful voice and a loyal fan base. His exit felt like a piece of the group's heart had been taken away. His departure wasn't just about moving on. Many believe it reflected deeper issues, ongoing conflicts over money, control, and the group's direction. For fans, it was the beginning of the end. After Major left, the original Delfonics lineup began to slowly fall apart. The bond between the members had frayed too deeply to hold. Some tried to continue with new singers, but the chemistry wasn't the same. William Hart continued performing under the Delfonics name, keeping the music alive. But the unity that once defined them was gone. And with it, A chapter of soul music history began to quietly close. The power struggle and broken trust. As the Delfonics climbed the charts and collected accolades, a quieter battle was unfolding behind the scenes, one rooted in money, power, and control. Some members of the group believed that Tom Bell and especially William Hart held too much authority over everything. Bell eventually stepped back, but Hart stayed at the center of it all, controlling not just the creative direction, but also the finances and business decisions. Tommy was smart, one member reflected. Once Tommy found out how things were going, he moved off, 'cause he could. William Hart, for all his talent, was accused of keeping a tight grip on the group's earnings. According to several members, he made the calls about who got paid and how much. And in their eyes, he wasn't sharing fairly. They felt like they were putting in just as much work, but weren't seeing their share of the rewards. Over time, frustration turned into resentment. The more control Hart maintained, the more isolated the other members began to feel. People close to the group said it started to feel less like a band and more like a dictatorship. Decisions were made without discussion. Voices were ignored. Some members felt reduced to background players, left out of the vision they helped build. That kind of silence, the feeling of being used, can destroy trust. And it did. What began as quiet disagreements turned into open tension. The group still looked united on stage, but behind closed doors, everything was falling apart. Songwriting became another major source of conflict. William Hart was, without question, the group's lyrical genius, one of the best songwriters of his era. He wrote or co-wrote many of the group's biggest hits, including La La Means I Love You and Didn't I Blow Your Mind This Time. But some of the other members believed they had contributed to those songs too, offering ideas, helping shape the sound, influencing the lyrics. Yet their names were nowhere to be found in the credits. In the music industry, credit isn't just about recognition. It's about money, respect, and future opportunities. Not getting credited can feel like being erased. Some members believed Hart took more credit than he should have. And when people start to feel invisible in their own group, that resentment deepens. Instead of collaborators, they felt like sidemen. The balance was gone. "We got one check for $7,500 apiece for La La Means I Love You," one member said bitterly. "And that's it. Didn't pass, no." Record label troubles and creative frustration. As the Delfonics climbed the charts, their relationship with their record label, Philly Groove, became increasingly strained. On the surface, the label had helped launch them into stardom. But behind the scenes, there were growing tensions that would eventually hurt the group's momentum. Stan Watson, one of the key figures at the label, had a blunt way of handling the group's concerns. When the band questioned why they weren't seeing more from record sales, his response was simple. "You guys make your money on the road. Don't worry about the sales of the record." It was a harsh reality. While the group rode from city to city in a 16-passenger van, Watson was being chauffeured around in a Rolls-Royce. That contrast didn't go unnoticed. Over time, members of the group began to feel boxed in creatively. They wanted to evolve, experiment with new sounds, and grow as artists, but the label pushed back. The people in charge wanted them to stick to the formula, the same style of love ballads and soul melodies that had made them famous in the first place. To the label, it made business sense, but to the artists, it was stifling. The members started to feel like they weren't making music out of passion anymore. They were just following orders. Every time they brought new ideas to the table, the label shut them down. No risks, no reinvention. Just the same sound, over and over again. That kind of creative limitation can drain even the most passionate performers. For the Delfonics, the joy of making music began to fade. It wasn't art anymore, it was work. And the more they were told what to do, the less connected they felt to the songs. Over time, the bond between the group and the label began to break. Some members felt like the label cared more about profits than their happiness, growth, or artistic freedom. They were talented performers and songwriters, but not business savvy. And in an industry that thrives on fine print, that lack of knowledge hurt them. After 1974, their success began to slip. The hits slowed down. The excitement faded. Other soul groups like the Stylistics began to take over the spotlight. The Delfonics, locked into a sound that no longer felt fresh, couldn't keep up with the changing times. But while other groups adapted and evolved, the Delfonics were stuck. They couldn't break free from the sound their label insisted they keep. And slowly, fans began to move on. Fewer people bought their albums. Fewer radio stations played their songs. Creative differences and the slow decline. As the music world shifted into the disco era, the Delfonics struggled to keep up. While the genre itself was just another thing to some, critics began to point out that the group wasn't evolving. They weren't experimenting. They weren't changing with the times. And that lack of growth started to hurt their image. In the music industry, being labeled outdated is a tough blow. And while the Delfonics continued to make music, the impact wasn't what it once was. They were no longer climbing the charts. Radio play declined. Their name, once spoken with excitement, now came up less and less. They tried to stay active, touring, recording, doing what they could to keep the flame alive. But it was clear their glory days were behind them. The truth is, it wasn't just one thing that brought the group down. It was everything. The creative disagreements, the internal power struggles, the legal fights over the name, the financial tensions, the record label's control. One by one, each issue chipped away at their unity, and eventually, it broke them apart. They didn't vanish overnight. They still had fans, still had moments of brilliance. But the magic, that special energy that once set them apart, had faded. The group was no longer a powerhouse in the music world. Their influence lingered, but their presence began to disappear from the spotlight. The members went their separate ways. Some continued performing under variations of the group's name, but it was never quite the same. Yet despite everything they went through, the Delfonics left a lasting legacy. Their music continues to resonate with audiences old and new. Their smooth harmonies and heartfelt lyrics helped define the Philadelphia soul sound and influenced generations of artists. But behind those beautiful love songs is a painful reality. A story of what happens when creative brilliance is overshadowed by control, money problems, and personal conflict. The complicated story of the Delfonics after they split. By the early 1980s, the original Delfonics had fractured into separate groups, each led by one of the Hart brothers, William and Wilbert. In a surprising shift around 1980, Major Harris left Wilbert's lineup and joined Williams. Not long after, another familiar face returned, Randy Kaine. Then in 1985, Frank Washington also switched over from Wilbert's group to join Williams' side. With William Hart, Major Harris, and Frank Washington all together, this trio became the core of the group's recording lineup for a time. Yet despite working together in the studio, the splintering never fully healed. The members still toured as part of different versions of the Delfonics, leaving fans unsure which group was the real one. Then came a rare and special moment. In 1989, Wilbert Hart, Major Harris, and Frank Washington reunited, if only briefly, to appear together on the Arsenio Hall show. Performing under the Delfonics name, their return was a nostalgic surprise that thrilled longtime fans. New faces, old name. The 1990s brought even more changes. Multiple Delfonics groups continued to perform, each with shifting lineups, but they also embraced new opportunities. One notable collaboration came in 1996, when William Hart, Major Harris, and Frank Washington contributed background vocals to a hip-hop track, After the Smoke is Clear, on Ghostface Killah's album Iron Man. It was a clear sign that younger artists still respected the legacy of the Delfonics and wanted to bring their signature sound into modern music. Still, the lineup continued to evolve. William Hart began touring with a new team that included Johnny Johnson and Garfield Fleming, performing under the Delfonics name. Meanwhile, Major Harris teamed up with Frank Washington and Pat Palmer to form another group. Wilbert Hart, not to be left behind, also reassembled his own version of the group. His lineup featured Salam Love, who had previously performed with William, and a talented new addition, Eben Brown, a singer known for his work with Ray, Goodman and Brown, and the Manhattans. Eben Brown stayed with Wilbert's group for 5 years, from 1993 to 1998, before taking a short break from music. As members came and went, new names emerged. Van Fields joined as the first tenor, and Greg Hill, a singer from New York, also came on board. By 1999, Fields and Hill were actively performing with Wilbert's lineup. But the cycle of change continued. In 2000, Van Fields left to join the Stylistics, another legendary soul group. Greg Hill stayed a few more years but eventually left in 2005. The decline. By the early 2000s, William Hart's version of the Delfonics, featuring Johnny Johnson and Garfield Fleming, had become the more visible of the two groups. They were featured in popular concert DVDs like The Big Show and 70s Soul Jam, which brought their live performances into living rooms and reminded fans of the group's golden years. Wilbert Hart's group also had its spotlight moment. They appeared in Old School Soul Party Live, part of PBS's My Music series, a nostalgic celebration of soul's greatest voices. Meanwhile, Major Harris was featured in a re-released concert DVD from 1975 titled Blue Magic, Margie Joseph, and Major Harris Live, which gave fans a glimpse into his prime as a solo performer. In 2005, Wilbert Hart showed that he wasn't finished creating. He released a new album titled Phonic Zone, writing and producing every track himself. One of the songs even featured rapper Rick Ross. The single Here For You, I Apologize for the Person, bridged generations of music and proved that Wilbert was still evolving as an artist. Both William and Wilbert continued performing through the mid-2000s, William with Johnson and Fleming, and Wilbert with Salam Love and a singer named Branch. Though they walked separate paths, both carried on the Delfonics name with pride. In a rare and emotional moment, William and Wilbert reunited on stage with Randy Kaine at the Rhythm and Blues Foundation Awards in Philadelphia. It was the first time the three original members had performed together in many years. That night, they were honored with the Pioneer Award, a well-deserved recognition of their contributions to soul music. Following the reunion, Randy Kaine stayed on to tour with William's group. Where are the members today in 2025? William Poogie Hart. William Hart, the creative soul behind the Delfonics, co-founded the group in 1965 alongside his brother Wilbert. Known to many as Poogie, William was the group's primary songwriter and the voice behind their most iconic tracks. With Tom Bell as his collaborator, William penned hits like La La Means I Love You, Ready or Not, Here I Come, Didn't I Blow Your Mind This Time, and Can't Hide from Love. Songs that defined the Philadelphia soul sound and climbed the Billboard R&B and pop charts between 1968 and 1974. But success came with complications. By 1975, the group had split into two separate entities, each led by one of the Hart brothers. Legal disputes followed over who could use the Delfonics name. In 2007, a judge ruled that both brothers could continue using the name, but only if they made it clear to audiences which version of the group they represented. Wilbert would go on to slightly alter his group's name as a result. Throughout his life, William remained committed to his craft. He continued performing well into his 70s and was known for being soft-spoken, yet deeply spiritual. Outside of music, William was a devoted father and grandfather, and he often spoke about how his personal relationships inspired his songwriting. In 1995, He and the original Delfonics were honored with induction into the Philadelphia Walk of Fame, a fitting tribute for a man whose lyrics touched millions. On July 14, 2022, William Hart passed away at the age of 77 following complications during surgery. His death marked the end of an era, but his legacy continues to echo through classic soul stations, samples in hip-hop, and heartfelt tributes from fans around the world. Major Harris. Major Harris III was born on February 9, 1947, and carved out his place in R&B history with a smooth voice and magnetic stage presence. Though he joined the Delfonics in the early 1970s, replacing Randy Kaine, he quickly became an integral part of the group's evolving sound. But in 1974, just as the group was peaking, Harris left to pursue a solo career. He signed with Atlantic Records and made an immediate splash. That same year, his sultry ballad Love Won't Let Me Wait became a massive hit, reaching number 5 on the Billboard Hot 100 and breaking into the UK charts as well. His solo success was brief but impactful. In 1984, he released I Believe in Love on Streetwave Records. Although the album received some radio airplay, particularly in the UK, it didn't achieve major commercial success. When his solo career slowed, Major Harris returned to performing with various iterations of the Delfonics throughout the 1990s and 2000s. He continued to tour the U.S., appearing on old-school soul tours and even participating in televised concerts. Harris was also known to fans for his warm personality and offstage charm. Those who worked with him often remembered him as kind-hearted and humble despite his fame. Sadly, on November 9, 2012, Major Harris passed away in Richmond, Virginia, from congestive heart and lung failure. He was 65 years old. Randy Kaine. Herbert Randall Kaine III, known to fans simply as Randy Kaine, was born on May 2, 1945, in Philadelphia. As one of the founding members of the Delfonics, he was there from the beginning, helping shape the group's signature sound through the 1960s and into the early 70s. With his smooth tenor and steady presence, Kaine was a key part of the group's golden era. He sang on classics like La La Means I Love You and Break Your Promise, helping the Delfonics carve out their place in R&B history. Although he left the group in 1971, it's worth noting that he played a major role in their success, even earning a Grammy for Didn't I Blow Your Mind This Time in 1974, despite no longer being in the lineup by that point. Behind the scenes, Randy was known as the peacemaker of the group, a gentle, thoughtful soul who avoided drama and focused on the music. His warmth made him beloved among bandmates and fans alike. After leaving the Delfonics, Randy didn't walk away from music entirely. In 1973, while working at the Philadelphia-based label WMOT Records, he helped introduce singer-songwriter Ted Mills to the vocal group Shades of Love. That introduction led to the formation of Blue Magic, another legendary name in Philly soul. Though he never reached the same level of solo fame as some of his peers, Randy's influence ran deep. He wasn't just a singer, he was a connector, a mentor, and someone who quietly helped shape the next wave of talent. In his personal life, Randy lived modestly in Mapleshade Township, New Jersey. Friends and family described him as deeply spiritual, humble, and grounded, someone who never let fame change who he was. He enjoyed reading, mentoring younger musicians, and spending time with his close-knit circle of loved ones. Sadly, Randy Kaine passed away in April 2009 at the age of 63. He died at home, surrounded by the quiet life he had built after years in the spotlight. Wilbert Hart. As of 2025, Wilbert Hart remains the last surviving original member of the Delfonics. Now in his 70s, he continues to perform and keep the group's legacy alive under his legally distinct banner. Known for his deep harmonies and steady presence, Wilbert took on the role of musical ambassador in the years following William's passing. His dedication to the group's legacy has kept their music alive on stage and in memory. In his personal life, Wilbert is known for being family-oriented and deeply spiritual. In recent interviews, he has spoken candidly about the ups and downs of fame, the pain of losing his brother, and the importance of staying true to one's roots. Even after decades in the business, Wilbert Hart remains a living link to the golden age of Philadelphia soul. Though the original lineup is now part of history, the Delfonics live on in samples, covers, movie soundtracks, and the hearts of fans around the world. Their harmonies, style, and emotion helped shape the sound of Philadelphia soul, leaving behind a body of work that feels just as relevant in 2025 as it did over 50 years ago.